Hi guys, today we're going to talk about my single favorite basketball skill, which is rebounding. I love rebounding because it requires your ability to anticipate and figure out where the ball is going to come off the rim or off the backboard, and then figure out how to have enough body control to get there and to keep the ball. So today we're going to talk about how to improve body control. I know that a lot of our youth athletes have been on COVID restriction and we haven't been able to practice with our teams, but I have a few things to show you today that you can do by yourself without a ball, without a hoop, without anybody else's help to get better at being a really good rebounder. So first, we need to understand what it takes to rebound and why rebounding is different than regular jumping in sports. The first and most important part is when you rebound, you do not have arm swing to help you jump. 30% of your vertical leap is 30% of your vertical leap comes from arm swing. So if we look at a volleyball approach, if we look at when we're going to test somebody's vertical leap, usually it involves swinging that arm back and driving your arms up and going after the target. We don't have that option in basketball. In basketball, we're in close quarters and we have to be able to load and jump and reach as high as we can to outfight the other guy for the ball. So the first most important part is being able to jump with no hands. And to be able to jump with no hands, you have to be able to be really, really efficient at loading your pelvis and loading your hips so that you can use your butt. Your glute muscle is the single most important muscle in sports. And I know that you've heard me say that 1,000 times, but when we're talking vertical leap and jumping, your glute muscle is king. So if you look at, here is my pelvis, and here is my pelvis from the side. As I squat and coil to go jump, the better job you do at rotating your pelvis forward over that fixed femur, the more muscle you put on stretch. So my butt muscle runs from my pelvis to my leg. My hamstring muscle runs from my pelvis to my leg. If I can put those two really big groups of muscle on stretch, it's like a giant rubber band. And that giant rubber band propels me up into the air to go get the ball. So I have to have enough length and strength in my hamstring and my glute to let my pelvis rotate over that fixed femur and be able to stick my butt out. But there's another piece of the puzzle that we don't think about all the time that helps with that, and that's upper back mobility. You cannot load to jump in a slumped spine position. I want you to try it. It's incredibly hard to do. If you cross your hands over your chest so you're in a slump, and then I want you to try to squat really well. I have a really hard time sticking my butt out if I'm slumping or I have a big old curved upper back. So if this part of my back, my pec is tight, my thoracic spine is tight, my head is tight, if I'm in kind of this fixed poor posture, it makes it really, really hard to rotate that pelvis back in space to load my hamstring and to load my glute muscle. So upper back mobility has a huge impact on my ability to jump without hands. If I want to be able to jump without hands, pelvis rotates back, thoracic spine extends, and now I can explode up to go get the ball. So upper back mobility and hip, hugely important in that no-handed jump. Now we have to look at the other side of the joint and the other side of rebounding. So I have now left the ground with no hands. Now I have to reach as high as I can to get up in the air and get the ball. So that takes mobility, again, through my upper back. It needs to be able to extend or be upright to get me in that preload position, but it also has to be able to extend to get my hands not just above my head, but oftentimes above my head and behind me to pull down. So upper back mobility and lat mobility, which latissimus runs from my armpit to my low back. My ability to open this up and get my hands up is hugely important. But now if we look down to what can affect my ability to reach my hands over my head, it's hip flexors. So hip flexors run along the front side of my pelvis and attached to my thigh, right? If I sit all day, if I complete a lot of activities that are very hip flexor dominant, so bicycle abs, mountain climbers, burpees, Stairmaster, like this repetitive hip flexion, aggressive activity, or if I sit, when I sit, my hip flexor's in a shortened position all day. Okay, so if my hip flexor is tight when I go to stand up, you're not going to be able to load the front of your pelvis. You won't notice that because as you stand up, your body will find a path of least resistance. And so if my hip flexor's tight, I tend to shear through my low back to get to that upright position. But now when I want to reach up over my head to go get that ball and pull it back down, the longer and stronger my hip flexor can be to let me load into the front of this pelvis to help me recruit a lot of abdominal muscle, now I'm going to be able to go way up high and pull that ball down. If my hip flexor is tight, that's going to limit how far over my head I can reach. And if my hip flexor is tight so that my pelvis can't rotate properly, I'm not going to be able to put this big ab muscle on stretch. And again, we talked about when I put a muscle on stretch, it's like a giant rubber band. I want a big explosion out of that giant rubber band. So I want to be able to put my ab muscle on stretch so that once I get up here, it's not just about getting 8 feet up in the air to go get that ball or 10 feet or whatever. It's not enough about getting up. I've got to get up, capture it, and come back down. So hip flexor is going to determine how high up I can get and how much ab I can use to help get down. So the third piece to rebounding is keeping a hold of the ball, right? I get up, I got to be able to control my body. And this is where it takes the most athletic talent in my mind, is to be able to control that position. So I have to have enough ab strength and coordination of my pelvis to recoil. So I'm going to come up, and the minute I start to pull down, ab muscle has to kick in, but that's not enough. As it kicks in, I have to be able to drive my pelvis back and kick my butt out. So I jump up, rebound, and immediately pull hips back. That's not just about coaches telling you to pull back to get into that triple threat position. That pulling back helps you have body control and be able to land securely so that you can make your next move. Okay, so how can I train my body to be able to do all those really great things without going out there and having to rebound and rebound and rebound? So first we need to train coiling to jump. So we talked about my pelvis needs to be able to rotate forward over that fixed femur with an upright back so that I can drop into my hips and drive up out of my hips. From a stretching perspective, if I hang on to a doorknob, a railing, something that I can hang on, I'm going to have you hang on to a doorknob, squat, stick your butt out and hang, come back up, squat, stick your butt out and hang. So what happens is when I stick my butt out and hang, I'm working on mobilizing my upper back and getting my pelvis into a really good position for that load without hands jump. So that'll warm me up for that. And then if we look at the strengthening side of things, I prefer to strengthen my basketball stuff on 1 foot. On 1 foot. Rarely will you have 2 feet coming down exactly at the same time where you're solid and you're sturdy. Typically, if I'm landing in basketball, I'm landing in traffic. So there's somebody to the side of me, there's somebody to the front of me. So I tend to land a half a bubble off plumb. So I have 1 foot down and 1 foot not as solidly down. So single foot training is a better way to prepare for basketball. I want a single foot train, but I want a single foot train where I teach my body to be able to drop into that hip. So now what I'm going to do is find a surface. So today I'm going to use my garage door. I want to find a surface that I can touch every single time. So I'm going to do single leg, and I'm going to stand on 1 foot, and I'm going to reach this foot as far back as I can, touch the door, and come back up. So my pelvis is rotating, my knee is bending, and I am reaching as far back in space as I can. This is not the same as a single leg RDL. A single leg RDL, I keep my leg completely straight and I reach straight down. That's going after hamstring and back extensors. I don't want that. I want a bent knee and I want my pelvis rotating over the top of that, because that drives that ischial tuberosity, or that drives me back into using more butt. More butt, better rubber band, more explosion when I jump. So I want a single leg. How far back in space can I reach and drive that leg is going to drive me further into that butt. The biggest thing you want to make sure of that you're not cheating is if you're weak and you're not used to this, which you will be, my pelvis has to stay even, which means when I come back, I should stay here. I don't want to see you half onto this hip and tipping to the side. I want my pelvis to stay square in space and to be able to drive straight back and come up. When you get done, your butt should hurt and your hamstring should hurt and it should be tired, but that's going to help you get here to here. Now we have to look at the top half of the jump, right? We talked about reaching up and coming back down. So for the reaching up part, same thing. I want a wall or something that is a mark to me so that I'm going the same distance every time, because what's going to happen is as you get tired, your body will cheat and you'll go less distance. So this time, again, we're going towards single leg. I'm going to stand on one foot. You can hook that other foot if you want. Hands up over your head. I'm going to reach back as far as I can and come back forward, and reach back as far as I can and come back forward. I want you to push your belly button and your pelvis as far forward as you can and then come back. If your back hurts, stop. Okay? Low back pain with this exercise tells us one of two things. Either you don't have enough hip flexor mobility to be able to shift into the front of that pelvis, and so instead you're going to shear through your back as your body tries to find more motion. Or, and it can be both, I don't have enough abdominal strength to be able to control my head behind my body, and so again, I'm going to shear through my low back. Either way, don't shear through your low back. It's not worth it to cause low back pain, but it also, that back talking to you will tell you we have a limitation in your hip or we have a limitation in your belly muscle. If you want that assessed, physical therapy is the place to go and we can take a look at that for you. But if everything feels fine, the further you can reach back and recoil, the stronger and the more awesome you'll be here. Now we have the last part, right? We have that I have to pull it down and be here. So for this one, I recommend finding a wall or a garage door or a fence or something, again, where I have a tactile cue or something I can feel. So now I'm going to have you be here, touch the wall. I'm not going to do it because I'll run into the camera. But I'm going to have you reach back, touch the wall, jump up, and try to touch the wall again. So basically we're trying to teach your brain, I have to rotate my pelvis forward, backward, and the minute I start to come back down again, my pelvis has to go forward again. So I want that big reach and then recoil. So if I'm trying to drive my hips towards the wall, that'll help you motor plan that so that you have better balance when it happens in traffic. That exercise, because we're trying to motor plan or teach your body the right pattern for doing it, that exercise we want to start on 2 feet and transition to 1. So if I can transition to 1, driving back, and you can do that with no loss of balance, you're phenomenal. So that's my little spiel on rebounding today. If you guys have any questions or any problems, reach out to me. Again, if you have any pain, it bothers your knee, it bothers your low back, any part of you, stop. This is not a no pain, no gain activity. However, pain is a great sign of something in the system is not working the way it should. Your body's attempting to load correctly with the stuff I've given you today, and you physically can't because of a soft tissue restriction or because something's too weak. So that's definitely a problem area that you can address. Have a great day rebounding.